Camera this way.
All right, St. Louis, we have a distinguished guest from the. Is California the Golden or the Sunshine State?
I think it's a Golden State. I think it's Sunshine State of Florida. But don't
Sunshine.
believe him. Not so distinguished.
Okay. What part of? First of all, introduce yourself. What's your name?
Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings. My name's Amin Eshakier from Orange County, California. I've been very graciously hosted by the one and only Umar. So Jazakallah, and thank you
Happy
so
to
much.
have you.
Alhamdulillah.
And you got some interesting things going on out there in California. You are involved in a prison ministry dawah effort, Link Outside.
That's right.
Correct. And briefly describe to people what exactly is Link Outside and what do you do?
Yeah, so Link Outside is, in one ways, you can say it's a prison ministry where we provide religious education from an Islamic perspective, but it also, too, many ways, evolved to just becoming a general prison outreach rehabilitation. So offering mentoring, offering in-person visitation, correspondence courses, and then when brothers and sisters come home, helping them re-enter and integrate back into society by plugging them into like different kind of resources for jobs, housing, and then just social integration. So I like to think of ourselves as kind of like a wraparound service we do for anybody impacted, justice impacted individuals.
Two questions. Number one, what do you think is the appeal of Islam for the incarcerated, for those that are in prison? And number two, what are the biggest challenges for people? Because we all know the story. People practice religion in prison and then get out and fall by the wayside. What's the biggest obstacle to them, becoming devout on the outside?
Yeah, definitely. Good question. So, in terms of the appeal, I think that a younger version of myself would be like, it's the belief of Islam and the Tawheed and the message of Islam that resonates. But as I've gotten older and looked into it more and researched it more, actually you can trace it back to the prototype Muslim movements, the black Muslim movements, whether it's the Moorish Science Temple or Nation of Islam. And despite their views of Islam being, so not so orthodox, basically the message that they were providing, and even goes back to like the teachings from Marcus Garvey, was that Islam was offering something that provided a sense of liberation for African Americans through the heritage of Islam's presence in Africa, whether it's talking about the times of Timbuktu, where there were some of the most prominent Islamic scholars and sources of education in the whole world. Also, too, just the ideas of the the unity, the classlessness of Islam, where people are judged not on their class or their status, but more on their character. So a lot of those things were appealing, and then over time, it also kind of created a almost like a way for individuals who wanted protection or wanted safeguarding could actually identify as being Muslim and could actually get those advantages of being
an affiliation. Because one of the issues, especially in California, for those that are unfamiliar, is there's a big gang culture in California, and the gangs are racialized in California. So I have a question. Traditionally, most prison converts are African American. What happens if a white American, Southside Mexican, etc., wants to convert to Islam? Isn't that a very dangerous proposition in the California prison system?
It is. So for those viewers out there who are not familiar, like you were saying, it's a very race-based system and gang-based system. So if you happens to be a white prisoner, let's say you have no gang affiliation, by default, by almost survival, you're going to have to associate with your race's gang population in the prison. So if it's a white individual, they might be having to align themselves with skinhead Nazi type of individuals. Same thing with Latinos. It'd be like different gangs and African Americans. So if somebody wanted to actually convert, and it kind of depends actually.
And there's a lot of beef between the races, especially between the Mexican and black gangs.
Yes, right? there's beef between all three gangs for whatever reason, prison politics, and if something happens, that one gang did something to another race, for example, irregardless of your position on it, you have to take your race's stance
right,
and retaliate. If you want to become Muslim, it pretty much means you're aligning yourself with the African American population or race in that prison. So if you're not African American, you're Latino, or you're white, you have a couple of options. You could, one, do it privately. You just have to kind of very minimalize your external practices just to basically not arouse any suspicion, because it would basically, you'd be considered a traitor, even though it doesn't make sense for us on the outside, but that's how it's viewed. Like, you literally,
right, and we've seen that in other prison systems where white people that converted have been killed and attacked and stuff like that. Yeah.
So the other thing is, you can actually, option 2, you can be open about it, and what happens to a lot of those individuals is they get transferred to what they call a sensitive needs yards, SNY yard, and those are basically like sections of the prison that are basically cut off from the rest, and they're basically given a space for anybody who's done something that would make them a target for the general population, what they call GP. So, like, for example, people who've left gangs, who are no longer avowed with gangs, they might go to that sensitive needs yards, or they're convicted of a crime that's maybe very controversial. They'll go there. So those individuals,
I'd imagine Jews are in a very sensitive position if they're incarcerated in California. If they're seen as white, and then they're housed with the neo-Nazis, that seems like a very difficult proposition.
Yes, Omar, that's a good question. They can either align themselves with the white and just bite the bullet, or they have another option. This is a wild card here, where they can align themselves with the other group. So there is an other race. So when you're going to prison in California, and you're not black and you're not white and you're not Latino, you get assigned as other. So it can be, for example, Asian American. It can be Pacific Islander. It can be from the Indian subcontinent. And they kind of actually create their own gang, maybe not as to the same extent, but actually the individuals who run that other race gang are actually, I think, like the Samoans or the Polynesian individuals have like kind of taken the management of that race. So if you don't feel comfortable in that white gang, and you're kind of maybe even like myself, and I might go to the other race just because it's kind of like it's an open bag. Even some people who are mixed, they don't look black enough, they don't look white enough, they might go there, and you can kind of like you can believe in whatever you want to believe in, but at the end of the day, you gotta basically follow in line with whatever that leadership tells you to do.
Well, God bless America. What a great system we have. So what are the challenges when people get out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was gonna say the biggest challenge, if somebody is specifically, if they identify as being Muslim, the biggest challenge is having a community on the outside embrace you, and also provide for you opportunities for social and economic progression in your life.
Because their previous social and economic progression, their social and economic network is what landed them in prison in the first place, more often than not.
Yeah, in more words or less, that's exactly right. And so you have that option. You can go back to your same neighborhood, and chances are you're gonna have a lot of challenges there. You can try to get an education for yourself, but that comes at a cost and maybe issues of transportation. But really, what I believe and what I've seen, and I have seen some success stories, so I don't want to make it all sound doom and gloom, is when you see the Muslim community actually reach out and give a hand to these, primarily these individuals coming home who are Muslim, are African American, and the Muslim communities on the outside that have the most resources are primarily immigrant, whether it's Arab, whether it's South Asian or Desi. And so the best model I've seen are when those communities provide resources and embrace in a way that doesn't also compromise their identity. So come as you are to our masjid. We'll give you a space to interact, to socialize, maybe to get networking for job solutions. Maybe they'll provide some kind of financial assistance. And you don't have to change who you are.
So let me ask you a tough question. Get my Larry King mode right now.
Oh, wow, okay.
So the late, great Larry King and Mike Wallace and Brian Lamb and Charlie Rose were still alive, but those are some of my favorite interviews from American. The Brits are the best. But I was talking to a friend of mine today who has been Muslim for decades, convert, and actually called me this morning. And he is in the process of converting to Christianity.
Ah, really?
And he says he's never felt happier in his life. He said he just felt he hit a dead end, and you know, most of the Muslims around him were in a bad way. And he just happened to talk about prison ministry, even though this person has never been to prison. He just said, you know, he looked at their prison committee and just said, man, it was just so much more professional than anything he'd ever saw Muslims doing. Now, obviously, we know there's a claim of exclusivity on the correctness for Muslims and for Christians as well. But most people don't convert out of a deep theological study. They convert for reasons of sociology and self-help, right?
Right.
In 2022, looking at the state and the condition of the Muslim community, and I'm just gonna be honest with you, when I see young people nowadays and they tell me what masjid, I'm interested in Islam, what masjid should I go to? And I tell them, none. So now in prison's a different story, because a lot of these guys really, really, really need help. Okay, so I wouldn't be so negative towards them, because anything they're trying to do to get them out of, you know, to turn them away from what they've been doing is good, right? But is the Muslim community an attractive destination in 2022?
Man, you weren't lying about that tough question. Okay. I mean, I would like to think so, but you know, the reality is that, and I think I was saying this earlier when we were talking before the interview, is that there needs to be a level of maturity amongst the Muslim community to be able to take on these challenges, and I think that lacks in many communities, not all, but many communities. And what do I mean by maturity is being able to understand that Islam, or the role of a masjid, let me actually clarify, is not simply a place to pray, a place to do your religious holidays, a place to connect with people of your ethnicity, but it has to be more than that. And in fact, you have a model within the tradition of Islam that the masjid was more than that, was more than just a place of ritual, but it was a dynamic place. You could look at the Prophet's mosque, Masjid Nabawi, where it at one point was housing basically unhoused people, and something that many people today can relate to. And that was part of the mission of that masjid, of that community. So I think to be in 2022, Muslim boards, leadership positions, etc., really need to understand that the role of a Muslim community has to progress and has to grow beyond just literally four walls and a place to pray, but has to be something that's actually empowering and serving people. And I think.
And how does the ethnic divisions and because black converts, obviously there's a whole sociology to the black Muslim experience, and they're not going to feel welcome at every masjid.
Right, exactly. So I think what you really ought to do is have almost like a support system, kind of similar how in Islamic history there was a movement or like a system where the people who were migrating to a new city, like for example, the people from Mecca who were considered the Muhajirun, going to Medina, and the locals were called the Ansar, or the helpers.
Right.
That some kind of similar model needs to be built, because I think it's not it's impractical to expect somebody who's converted to Islam, is leaving prison, hey, here's a list of masajid in your local city, just go to them, go pick one. That's a very bad idea. It's a recipe for disaster. But what you really need is somebody on the ground, maybe if we're mature enough to actually have this as a paid position, where someone's actually walking that individual, taking the time out with them, introducing them to the community, and telling them the facts. Hey, you know what, I wouldn't go really spend too much time here. This is a place to go for resources. This is a place to go for socialization. This is a place to go for Islamic knowledge. I think in today's day and time, there isn't really like a one-stop shop. You kind of have to, kind of like a buffet style, where each masjid might have one thing that's appealing to you, and you have to kind of just know what it is that you need. So I think you really need people that are actually going to walk that path. But at a certain point, individuals also need to just have a come to understanding that I am going to be facing some, discrimination or some tough love from the community, and just to be able to understand this is something that is a shortcoming of Muslims, but Islam itself is perfect, and it shouldn't be people shouldn't have a negative view of Islam because of how Muslims are acting. We should work on that, of course, but I think there's also some kind of level of expectation when you come home that things aren't going to be as perfect as you thought they would be.
Okay, and to close out, you grew up in Orange County,
That's right. Yeah, Riverside County and Orange County.
in the
Later.
home county of Richard Nixon, and I have some Nixon swag on the table over there, and I'm collecting all my presidential buttons. And you, your background, your family is from the Middle East,
Correct.
and you are working diligently in this field, which is a very difficult one. So, best of luck. When I am next month in Jerusalem, and I'll be in the compound where the Western Wall is,
Ah,
and the Al-Aqsa Mosque is on the other side, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is in the neighborhood. I would definitely say a prayer for you in
okay, I
California,
appreciate it.
because you need it. It's been good talking to you, and I took him to get some Old Town donuts in Florissant. I took him to Catholic in Hazelwood. Took him to see the Arch. Now we're on the South Side, so he's got plenty of St. Louis sites before he heads
That's
out.
right. And I wanted to say, hey, if you're ever in St. Louis, you gotta reach out to Brother Umar. Man, he's a great host, and I definitely learned to appreciate a city that I never thought I would. So,
There
thank
you go. St. Louis, Umar Dunya.
you.